This is Resistance is Futile by Coulter, and this time I read several chapters in advance and made highlights, and I'm just going to go through the highlights. So this is what Antifa actually does: don masks and beat up political people they don't like. Well, it alarms me, and I haven't been beaten up. I think it's a big deal that so-called Antifa has been beating people up, which reminds me of a Mises quote. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, this is from World War II era. Mises wrote this book in 1944, or that's when it came out, and it's about the Nazis and the surrounding political issues. And Mises writes about the World War II time period and the years that led up to it. Actually, there have been in these last years all over the world two main political parties: the anti-fascists, i.e. the Friends of Russia, communists, fellow travelers, self-styled liberals and progressives, and the anti-communists, i.e. the Friends of Germany, parties of shirts of different colors, not very accurately called fascists by their adversaries. There have been few genuine liberals and Democrats in these years. And we see something similar today with so-called Antifa, which are roughly Friends of Russia, communists, socialists, fellow travelers, self-styled liberals, and progressives. And they call their opponents fascists, not very accurately. So it's all quite unoriginal. The so-called anti-fascists and fascists of World War II, neither of them were liberals. Neither of them were in favor of freedom. They were just different types of authoritarians competing for power. So now we have so-called Antifa beating up conservatives and marching through the streets with masks. So this is saying that Arizona tried to pass a law, and they were basically overruled and told that you have to follow federal policy. Not only federal law, but also federal policy. And you're not allowed to have a policy contrary to the federal government for areas where the federal government is in charge. And Coulter's point is basically that now that Trump is in office, people won't respect the federal authority because they just don't respect the law and how the country works. When they were in power, they were happy for, when they had Obama as president, they were happy to say, hey, look, the president is in charge. And now that Trump is the president, they're like, oh, no, I don't think the president's really in charge. So the Obama Justice Department said it crossed a constitutional line for a state to have its own immigration policy. But now we have sanctuary cities where they have their own immigration policy contrary to the federal government policy of Trump. So they're hypocrites and don't care much about legality, just care about their side and political power. I appreciated that Coulter does not like the censorship on Twitter and the censorship of memes like Pepe. So I found this passage interesting. Trump gives snobs a wonderful opportunity. By sneering at him, they can make fun of the Walmart types without getting called on it, because they're technically talking about a rich man who is president. They think people are deplorables, but they feel bad attacking the common man. But if they attack a rich man who represents the common man, then they can be nasty to flyover people. So I like these. It was just some quick facts about Obama stuff. Trump presidency, not normal, says serial fibber, MSNBC host. Anyway, what's normal, what the media like this did not complain about, is having the Department of Justice run guns to Mexico. That's not a joke, by the way. Like, I read about that story at the time. Bound up the stairs and warmly embraced Cuban dictator Raul Castro, as Obama did. Molest a White House intern half the president's age, then commit a slew of felonies to cover it up, as Bill Clinton did. Right, the media defended him. And his wife defended that and then ran for president, and people weren't like, well, she defended male patriarchy abusing women or something. Like, the left didn't care about that. The so-called feminists didn't care about that and abandoned her over it. Over how she attacked his victims. And it wasn't just, like, the age difference and the marital affair and stuff. Like, he also actually assaulted some women. Bomb a foreign country out of the blue on the day of your scheduled impeachment. I assume that's Bill Clinton, but I'm not really familiar with it. For the resistance, the only organizing principle is which position is worse for Trump. Is Russia a colorful country with a noble history of giving socialism a try? Or the most evil regime since Nazi Germany? Do I enjoy coarseness in popular culture, or am I a hothouse flower offended by dirty language? Am I enraged by the idea of the government secretly spying on American citizens, or is that a vital part of national security? Right, the point is, these are specific examples of ways the left is hypocritical. They just pick which of these based on who's in power and what's convenient for current politics, instead of having any actual lasting principles. Their positions, like whether they're offended by coarse language, are positions of convenience, chosen not based on actual values, just based on whether recently someone they like or dislike used dirty language. Is it outrageous that the private communications of the DNC were publicly revealed on WikiLeaks during a campaign? Or is it totally fantastic that a secret recording of Trump, the Access Hollywood tape, was blasted all over the world a month before the election? Right, they complained when Democratic stuff got leaked, and they were happy when a Trump video got leaked. Is transparency in government something that I support, or do I think Trump has to get off Twitter? That's a good one. A novel and independent thought that has occurred only to me. Yeah, attacking Trump solidifies the base and leads them to just defend him, and they're like, well, if you're attacking him on those bullshit grounds, then I'm on his side. And it makes it harder for there to be criticism. Like, as long as there's people yelling ridiculous criticisms of Trump, then reasonable people are going to say, well, that's wrong, I gotta be on Trump's side, instead of taking the time to criticize Trump. Like, it's harder to criticize Trump in reasonable ways when there are unreasonable people yelling at him that you need to oppose. You have more space to, like, debate the finer points of policy with Trump and his supporters when there aren't such unreasonable attacks on him. I do it anyways. I just don't care that much. I'm not popular enough for it to matter that much if I attack Trump or criticize Trump or whatever. So I wrote things like, don't trust Trump, he's not a conservative. And some of it's positive, like I wrote Trump loves fossil fuels. But the one I was looking for is Donald Trump as a protectionist. So I was perfectly willing to criticize his poor economic policy and his total ignorance of economics, and him not having read books that explained this hundreds of years ago. And so this is an extremely good post. Highly recommend it. Maybe I'll read this to you after I put these links in the notes. Oh, I already had that one. Alright, we're just going to repeat it anyways. And then we're going to add this one as well. The worst thing about Trump, though, like the thing that most offended me that he's ever said or done, is something that gets very little attention. It was Trump's comments after the terrorist attack on Pamela Geller's event in Texas. Garland. Okay. Breitbart Trump Garland comment. Oh crap, we have a Merrick Garland is distracting. Here we go. Trump blames Geller for being attacked by jihadis. That is what I was looking for. This should be good. I watched Pam Pryor and it looked like she's just taunting everybody, said Trump. What is she doing drawing Muhammad? And it looks like she's actually taunting people, and it's disgusting that it happened and everything else. But why are they doing drawing Muhammad? Isn't there something else they can draw? So they had like a art contest where you draw Muhammad, and then a Muslim terrorist came and tried to kill them. And then Trump said this, why are you drawing Muhammad? Like, he just doesn't respect freedom or something? It's very risky for her. I don't know, maybe she likes risk, but what the hell is she doing and what is the purpose? The purpose of it is free speech and not to be bound by Sharia. You know, this is a free country, right? So we can draw Muhammad here. Anyway, as usual, he's mixed. Like, he was against building a Muslim mosque on where Muslim terrorists blew up New York, but yeah, very nasty treatment of Geller. It was a free speech event in a free country, and then someone tries to kill her, and Trump has negative things to say about her. Like, what the fuck? Ted Cruz, on the other hand, was said good things about this. He defended her. Okay. So right, it's hard to point out Trump's flaws when there's so many like false flaws, and you don't want to just pile on to the vocal attacks on Trump. Because like on the whole, he could be a lot worse, you know? The left's attacks on him are just not fair. So you don't want to just add to the noise of Trump hatred. Like, oh, on the whole, I want to defend him, but I still do have plenty of criticisms of him and his. And I say them anyways, but I understand that a lot of people find it's not a good atmosphere to say them. And if I had like a more prominent political column, I would not focus on attacking Trump. But if there was very little attacking of Trump, or like no unreasonable attacking of Trump, and I had a political column, then I might point out some of his mistakes, like on economics. And that's what this blog post is about. So Trump is bitching about outsourcing and wants to tax outsourcing companies and not let them send jobs overseas without being taxed, and also put a big tax on imports. So that's all fucking awful. And today's, he put out a policy paper, Reforming the US-China Trade Relationship to Make America Great Again. So this quote was from his book, so I already knew he was a protectionist, because I actually looked into him when he was running for president. I read some of his books and found out what he was about. And I paid attention, and I read his policy paper, and the policy paper says he wants fair trade, but not protectionism, even though, you know, his book advocates protectionism. Then he says, China hasn't reciprocated. So America's opened its markets to China, but China has not opened its markets to America, so it's unfair. So China is protectionist, says Trump, which is true, and uses unlawful tariff and non-tariff barriers to keep American companies out of China and tilt the playing field in their favor. It's true that China has such policies, I think. But, you know, Trump basically thinks because China is protectionist, we should be protectionist back to them. But that's not protectionism, says Trump. And anyways, he's completely clueless about economics and protectionism. See, he wants they will designate China as a currency manipulator. This will begin a process that imposes appropriate countervailing duties on artificially cheap Chinese products. In other words, he wants tariffs. He says they have tariffs, so we're going to have tariffs. And he claims that's not protectionism, but it is, and it is a bad idea, as Frederick Bastiat explained in 1845, and Trump is just completely unaware of because he doesn't read, or doesn't read the right books or something. I don't want to be like too unfair to Trump because he's not alone in being completely ignorant of important economic writers. You know, it's extremely common to be totally ignorant of these things, but he still is ignorant of them, and he's talking about economics. Like, why can't he find an expert who actually has a clue about this stuff? Like, most of the so-called experts in this field are clueless, but there are people who know this stuff. If you go to like Mises.org, you can find the kind of people who have read Bastiat and understood it. And they write political articles, and I'm sure there are people who could be hired as advisors. Mises.org, by the way, is that's how you spell it, Mises.org. And then here's where you can find some good economists. Austrian economists, economics, freedom, and peace. Guess I'll link it. All right. So what does Bastiat say? Bastiat explains the issue of, this is about, should liberty be reciprocal? You know, if they have tariffs, should we get them back with our own tariffs? Or should we have free trade despite them having tariffs in their country on our stuff? You know, if they tax our imports, should we tax their imports? Does that help us as fighting back, or is it just economically illiterate and destructive? So let's read. We've just seen that whatever increases the expense of conveying commodities from one country to another acts in the same way as a protective duty, or in other words, as more onerous transport. A tariff is like a marsh, a rut, an obstruction, a steep declivity, an obstacle. The effect of the obstacle is to increase the difference between the price of the producer of a commodity, the price the producer of a commodity receives, and the price the consumer pays for it. In the same way that marshes and quagmires do the same thing, because if there's a marsh in the way, so it costs more to transport a good, then there's a larger gap between the gain of the producer and the payment of the consumer, because there has to be more money diverted for marsh bypass transportation. So there's people who understand that, not very many, but some, that obstacles are not less obstacles because they are artificial and caused by our government on purpose. And our mercantile prospects have more to gain from liberty than protection. Exactly the same reason that makes a canal more favorable than a steep roundabout and inconvenient road. They maintain this liberty must be reciprocal. If we remove the barriers we have erected against the admission of Spanish goods, for example, Spain must remove the barriers she has erected against the admission of ours. They are therefore the advocates of commercial treaties on the basis of exact reciprocity, concession for concession. Let us make the sacrifice of buying, say they, to obtain the advantage of selling. They are protectionists in principle, only a little more inconsistent than pure protectionists. And so Bastiat will now demonstrate. So there's two towns, Stolta and Puera. They completed at great cost a highway from one town to the other. And then Stolta said, see how Puera inundates us with her products. In consequence, they created and paid a body of obstructive, so-called because their business was to place obstacles in the traffic coming from Puera. Soon after, Puera did the same. At the end of some centuries, knowledge having made great progress, the common sense of Puera enabled her to see that such reciprocal obstacles could only be reciprocally hurtful. She therefore sent an envoy to Stolta, who, laying aside official phraseology, spoke to this effect. We made a highway, and now we throw obstacles in the way of using it. This is absurd. It would have been much better to have left things as they were. We should not, in that case, have had to pay for making the road in the first place, nor afterwards have incurred the expense of maintaining obstructives. In the name of Puera, I come to propose to you, not to give up opposing each other all at once. That would be to act upon principle, and we despise principles as much as you, but to lessen somewhat the present obstacles, taking care to estimate equitably the respective sacrifices we make for this purpose. So spoke the envoy. Stolta asked for time to consider, and proceeded to consult with her manufacturers and agriculturalists. At length, she declared the negotiations were broken off. On receiving this intimation, the inhabitants of Puera held a meeting. An old gentleman, they had always suspected he had secretly bought by Stolta, rose and said, the obstacles created by Stolta injure our sales, which is a misfortune. Those we have ourselves created injure our purchases, which is another misfortune. With reference to the first, we are powerless, but the second rests with ourselves. Let us at least get rid of one, since we cannot rid ourselves of both evils. Let us suppress our obstructives without requiring Stolta to do the same. Some day, no doubt, she will come to know her own interests better. A second counselor, a practical, matter-of-fact man, guiltless of any acquaintance with principles, and brought up in the ways of his forefathers, replied, don't listen to that utopian dreamer, that theorist, that innovator, that economist, that stultinomaniac. We shall all be undone if the stoppages of the road are not equalized, weighed, and balanced between Stolta and Puera. There would be greater difficulty in going than in coming, in exporting than in importing. We should find ourselves in the same condition of inferiority relative to Stolta as Havre, Nantes, Bordeaux, Lisbon, London, Hamburg, and New Orleans are with relation to the towns situated at the sources of the Seine, the Loire, the Garonne, the Tagus, the Thames, the Elbe, and the Mississippi, for it is more difficult for a ship to ascend than to descend a river. A voice, Towns at the mouths of rivers prosper more than towns at their source. This is impossible, same voice, but it is so. Well, if it be so, they have prospered contrary to rules. Reasoning so conclusive convinced the assembly, and the orator followed up his victory by talking largely of national independence, national honor, national dignity, national labor, inundation of products, tributes, murderous competition. In short, he carried the vote in favor of the maintenance of obstacles. And if you're at all curious on the subject, I can point out to you countries where you see with your own eyes road makers and obstructivists working together on the most friendly terms possible, under the orders of the same legislative assembly, and at the same expense of the same taxpayers, the one set endeavoring to clear the road, and the other set doing their utmost to render it impassable. Emphasis added. Trump is the second counselor. He still hasn't thought of an answer to the old gentleman. And who exactly is asking him to think of such an answer? So a town at the mouth of a river is in a good position to receive trade, to get imports. And a town at the source of a river is in a good position to give trade, to do exports. And a bunch of important towns were at the mouths of rivers, were in good places to receive imports and prospered. And that's why these are all famous towns. And the places at the sources of the rivers are less famous, and you don't know their names offhand. And these people think that's impossible because they think that exporting is good and importing is bad, because they're nationalists and protectionists. And it's such nonsense, because imports are how you get stuff, like food and clothing and raw materials and whatever else. So importing gives you stuff, and exporting, you're giving stuff to other countries. Like, obviously importing is better. Imports means you get goods and services, or maybe just goods. I don't know how you import services. But you get the point. Like, import means stuff comes to you. Export means stuff goes away from your country or town to elsewhere. So, like, importing is the one that makes you more prosperous, because then you have more stuff. But very confused people do not get that. So anyways, Bastiat explained this in 1845, and Trump has absolutely no clue. And apparently none of his advisors do either. And it would be easier for that to get national attention if the left wasn't calling Trump a deplorable racist xenophobe and Russian stooge. You know, they're taking up the bandwidth for Trump criticism with their stupid bullshit instead of serious, important criticism. Of course, the left hates Bastiat and wouldn't dream of listening to him because they hate capitalism and freedom and liberalism. Bastiat is a classical liberal, so yeah. He's French, by the way, so maybe don't call me a racist nationalist or whatever. Oh yeah, so this was a good point. So, Trump has been accused of committing sexual assault because of the Hollywood Access tape, where Trump said, quote, "they let you do it." And Coulter says, "I don't care how poor your command of English is, they let you do it means consent. You could win that case on summary judgment. Your Honor, he said they let you do it. By definition, that's not an assault. Case dismissed." The media fixed the inconvenient problem of Trump's having said they let you do it by simply editing that part out. So, yeah, they just keep misquoting him. Here's a clip. "When you are a star, you can do anything. Grab them by the pussy." You can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything. CNN, you can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the pussy. They just leave out the "they let you do it." So it's so fucking dishonest. You can't trust the media at all. And then they report that Trump admitted he sexually assaults unwilling women after he said they let you do it. So you might not believe Coulter, so she gives actual examples. So New York Times editorial. "And so we have now heard the Republican nominee for President of the United States bragging about repeated sexual assault." You know, that's not true. MSNBC. "A president who admitted to and boasted about repeated sexual assault. Just not true. They let you do it means he wasn't claiming to have assaulted anyone." That is sexual assault. You brag that you committed sexual assault. Moderator Anderson Cooper at a debate. Jesus, like, how is that guy a fucking moderator at a debate? He's so not neutral. I think, there's a very significant point, blah, blah, blah. You can get elected president of the United States after admitting sexual assault. Donald Trump was heard on videotape admitting to sexual assault. A video in which Trump boasts in vulgar terms about sexually assaulting women. Washington Post. CNN. Donald Trump could basically admit on tape to committing sexual assault and then win the presidency anyway. New York Times. Trump even admitted to a pattern of sexual assault on tape. And finally, on September 18, 2017, Hillary Clinton, America's most famous sexual assault defender, cited that really horrible video of Trump admitting to sexual assault. He said they let you do it. Yeah, these people are all fucking liars. I have an essay on lying, but it's about, like, more subtle issues. This is just fucking blatant lying. Anyway, this comment about Hillary Clinton being America's most famous defender of sexual assault is absolutely not a joke in any way. You should read High Crimes and Misdemeanors, the case against Bill Clinton, if you have no idea what Anne is talking about. Let's actually click the citation as well. Oh, it's a citation for Hillary saying that about Trump, not a citation about Hillary being a sexual assault defender, but she really went after the bimbo eruption of her husband. So you can read articles about it from Ann Coulter and read her books and stuff, and there are plenty of other sources as well. So this is about how people just don't get jokes when they don't like people. They're like, oh no, that's not a joke. They just must be stupid. They must have meant that literally. And it seems to be a cynical trick, not stupidity, but not always. Anyway. See, she says when The Nation magazine does it, they probably really don't get it, but she thinks the rest of the media aren't that stupid. So here's an example. 2008, John McCain showed up at the Sturgis motorcycle rally and said, I was looking at the Sturgis schedule and noticed that you have a beauty pageant, and so I encouraged Cindy to compete. Cindy is his wife. I told her with a little luck, she could be the only woman ever to serve as both the First Lady and Miss Buffalo Chip. You may not like the joke. You could say it's corny, but it's a joke. Not to liberals. PBS's Bonnie Erb grimly informed viewers that in the Miss Buffalo contest, female contestants are often scantily clad. Whether McCain knew this or not is not known. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow was shocked, saying, I mean, these are prepared remarks, which means he thought in advance about nominating his visibly horrified wife to take part in a biker beauty pageant. And the biggest girl of them all, Keith Olbermann, spent an entire segment on McCain's joke on his MSNBC show, asking in astonishment, was it an off day? Was it a tired candidate caught up in a strange kind of event? Or whatever it was, does this pose a political problem? So Anne says they're doing this cynically. They're not this stupid, they're doing it on purpose. It's not that they just were unaware that it was a joke, it's that they just will take any opportunity to attack Republicans, no matter how dishonest. So I highlighted this because it's a good example of that level of dishonesty. It's good to have some sense of how awful the media is, just like the previous ones, where they call Trump a admitted sexual assaulter, which is just lying. Alright, in his presidential announcement, Jindal said Russian hackers were more likely to see the secretary's emails. Right, it's the joke. Oh, the press got the joke until Trump made it about revealing the emails. So Jindal said Russian hackers were more likely to see Hillary's emails than the American people were. Scott Walker said, it's sad to think that right now, but probably the Russian and Chinese governments know more about Hillary's email server than members of the US Congress. Politico, the UK Daily Mail, and the New York Times all cited that as one of the best lines of the debate. The press got the joke until Trump made it. Trump did not say hack, he said find, and they've misquoted it over and over again. It deliberately changes its meaning from asking Russia to return emails that were stolen to asking Russia to hack Hillary's emails. My editor hates when I gave 800 examples, so you're only getting a few. So here you see the word hack in bold. So hack, all of these, and all those. This isn't paraphrasing, it's lying. I'm going to give that a highlight. I might want to go back. I didn't actually highlight what Trump said. Oh, I guess it doesn't give the exact quote. But yeah, he said something about it would be nice if Russia would find the missing emails and return them. You can look it up if you care. So this is about Charlottesville. So there was a Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville where a couple neo-Nazis and some right-wingers were defending the Confederate statue, and a bunch of leftist so-called Antifa showed up to beat them up, roughly. Anyway, so Trump was asked, disown, disavow. So Trump's crime wasn't his failure to condemn Nazis. There's no such thing, or white supremacists. His crime was saying, I think there is blame on both sides. The media had been very clear that this was not what they wanted him to say, that he didn't submit to their will, so they called him a racist. In his first remarks, Trump condemned, in the strongest possible terms, this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides, So Trump said both sides were bad and got lynched for it. Let me ask you, Mr. President, why did you wait so long to blast neo-Nazis? Why do Nazis like you? These are press conference quotes. This is how the media treats him for saying that both sides were bad in the Charlottesville debacle. The CEO of Walmart said you missed a critical opportunity to help bring the country together, did you? Nazis were there. David Duke was there. Can you tell us how you're feeling about your chief strategist, Mr. Bannon? They also wanted him to fire Bannon. Can you tell us broadly do you still have confidence in Steve Bannon? Senator McCain said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville. Is the alt-left as bad as white supremacy? Is the alt-left as bad as the Nazis? How concerned are you about race relations in America? And do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office? Mr. President, are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane? Both sides, sir. You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides. The neo-Nazis started this. You're saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly. Will you go to Charlottesville? Will you go check out what happened? Anyway, this was a press conference. This was about infrastructure, and these were the questions. She omitted a couple about infrastructure and just quoted all these questions. So Trump elaborated on the both sides point. What about the alt-left? Trump asked the press bullies. What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. I watched those videos very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. A normal person hearing this, who had not been through the left's indoctrination camp, would say, wait, I'm sorry. I think this cut off in the middle. Where did he praise white supremacists? But Trump's remarks were presented as, voila, it speaks for itself. I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups. But he refused to give in to their bullying, adding, you had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down, to them, a very important statue, and renaming a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. Anyway, so this is like how they harass Trump, and he says both sides were bad, and they just hate him for it. And he's such a fucking moderate. Like, he's being so reasonable. Like, I would say there was more blame on the alt-left in that instance. But Trump just said, oh, both sides were bad. And they can't stand that. All they want to hear is that only the right is bad and the left is good. Even when it's, violent people with clubs and masks. They're so biased. And Trump is more of a patriot and a normal person. What kind of person do you have to be to see people with like clubs and masks coming to a rally where they have no permit to start a fight? The left was the interlopers there. They came looking to start something. The right was just going to have a rally by themselves, and it was the counter-protesters who caused violence. And what kind of person do you have to be to say, oh yeah, the right is awful and the left is, angelic? How can you look at it that way? All right, and then they complain about Nazi regime began carrying torches at parades and rallies and burning buildings and Torah scrolls. and they say that the alt-right was clearly Nazis because they had torches. So I was totally unfamiliar with this, but this is a very good rebuttal from Anne Coulter. Oh, for Pete's sake, torchlight parades are an American tradition, going back to colonial days. Back when we were fighting real Nazis, FDR was greeted with a torchlight parade in Hyde Park. He began his speech by fondly reminiscing about his first torchlight parade as a small child, saying he saw a queer light outside the window and then peered and saw people coming down here to have a democratic celebration. Many towns still continue the tradition, such as Old Saybrook, Connecticut, where the annual torchlight parade, complete with fifes and drums, begins on Coulter Street in December every year. Torchlight parades are a patriotic American tradition. Liberals have no right to say, no, that's forbidden because it reminds me of the Holocaust. So let's see whose remarks stood the test of time. At college campuses around the country, these noble anti-fascist champions, championed by Romney and Rubio, have continued their violent attacks on conservative speakers, even ACLU members, liberal biology professors, and law professors who happen to believe in free speech. Since then, Confederate graveyards, monuments, fountains, and highway names have been airbrushed out of history from Maine to San Diego. So yeah, you can see like who's under assault here and who's doing the assaulting. Statues of Christopher Columbus were vandalized in Baltimore, Boston, and Houston. 3 monuments to the great explorer were damaged in New York City. One was decapitated, and Columbus's head dumped in a nearby garbage can. So this reminded me of 2 things. One, there's a South Park episode about this where Randy was a Columbus fan and then he tries to hide it. It was pretty funny. And 2, George Reisman, his name is Reisman, wrote an article about Columbus Day. There seem to be 2. Why Columbus is in fact the discoverer of America, and celebrate Columbus Day, not Savages Day. This is a short one. This is the one I had in mind. So he says Columbus is the real discoverer of America. Anyways, yeah, I'm going to link both of them. So if you're curious about the Columbus thing, you can look up the links. These are great. Okay. It's a game for leftists. See how many words and concepts they can anathematize with their intimidation tactics. Pepe the Frog, illegal alien, alt-right, 2 genders, IQ, chain migration, bossy, let's enforce laws on the books about immigration, and so on. And Anchor Baby, don't forget Anchor Baby. I thought it was notable that she included Pepe. I mentioned that earlier when she was complaining about the Twitter censorship. So yeah, the left has so many things you can't say or talk about or think, including a lot of stuff about like IQ data and research. In fact, when YouTube started their new censorship, the very first video they fucked over was about IQ. I'm gonna find it just a sec. Okay, I found it. So this is a blog post from August 2017 called "This is the first video to be sandboxed by YouTube's censorship alliance with the ADL." And what video is it? It is Race Differences in Intelligence. I watched it. It's like a sober, scholarly video. I don't agree with all of it, but I think that, you know, it should be part of the debate. And I don't think it's all wrong. And it's not like outrageous yelling. It's not ranting. It's not conspiracy theories. I think those things should be allowed on YouTube too. But it's not like that. You know, it's just a guy sitting there talking to the camera about ideas who has actually looked at research. It contained the argument that the main reason blacks have poorer outcomes than whites is not due to lack of opportunity, but due to lower IQ. Whether you agree with that or not, YouTube believes that no one should have the ability to share, comment, or like because of it. And, yeah. Back when the Soviet Union was actually threatening America with nuclear annihilation, and Russian spies were calling through our government, liberals were defaming Joe McCarthy. Jimmy Carter warned Americans about their inordinate fear of communism. Sting alerted teenagers to the silliness of the Cold War, singing, "The Russians love their children too." Dr. Seuss taught little children that the only difference between the USA and USSR was that we buttered our bread on different sides. Not a joke. New York Times Notable Book of the Year. For having the same position on gays as Obama circa 2008, Russians were walking on the fighting side of American liberals. Anyway, these were just like minor tidbits that I particularly liked. Like the examples of what Carter, Sting, and Seuss said about communism. And I think it's a good point that the position that's now considered like grossly homophobic and evil and whatever is more or less the Democratic position from 10 years ago. Like, they changed very quickly, and then they're really mad that people haven't updated their positions to agree with the new Democrat orthodoxy. It must be baffling to Putin to be considered the biggest monster ever produced by his nation. So one of Anne's themes here is basically that they hate Putin more than Stalin, or really, they don't care about Russia, they just care about attacking Trump. Although they also were Stalin sympathizers, they're just pretending to dislike Russia as a way of attacking Trump. So another non-joke was a New York Times claim about how Reagan stole the 1980 election by conspiring with Iranian terrorists to keep holding Americans hostage. So again, a nice tidbit about how fucking unreasonable the left is, and has been for quite a while. First of all, if the Russians did anything but put Trump in the White House, they were helping our country, not harming it. By the way, like, Hillary was involved with that, like, uranium and Russia crap, wasn't she? Yeah, Hillary Clinton, yeah, Russia and uranium, a closer look, blah, blah, blah. Read, like, Clinton crap. Hillary Clinton gave 20% of United States uranium to Russia. Yeah, so, I mean, Google is biased, so these look a lot like things that are going to deny it. But if you actually research this, I think it's legit. As far as I know, it's legit, and yeah, Snopes is not going to change my mind about that. Snopes is such a propaganda site. They used to be like a good Mythbuster site for like superstitions and stuff, but they went like super left-wing political. Like, they're pretty much as bad as PolitiFact. You can just read these fucking URLs. It's like WAPO, Politico, Vox, NPR, like The Hill. These are such biased sources, and Google just like covers the front page with the most biased sources it can find. Factcheck.org, PolitiFact. Like, this is straight up. All of these sources are leftist. If you want like a right-wing source, or like, you know, you have to type like Clinton Cash or something, and then maybe you'll find. Oh no, if you add Clinton Cash to the search, you don't find, you know, actual Clinton Cash info, which is the name of a well-known book. You find Snopes, Politico, The Hill, PolitiFact, FactCheck, New York Times. Fucking Google is so fucking biased. Right, to actually find it, this is one source. You can find other sources on this stuff, but yeah. And you can read about, you know, many different things Hillary did that were nasty. The left will just say, oh, this book is discredited, and the fact checks have proven it's wrong, and they're just such liars. Like, they'll say that about any book no matter what, without actually having any good rebuttals. If anyone can find like an actual good rebuttal, please contact me, because I'd be curious. But not just like some Snopes article that's like, well, it seems to be true, so we're going to rate that mostly false, because there was a minor exaggeration in the 18th paragraph. Let's look at the look inside. I just want to make sure that I'm remembering correctly that this has the uranium. Yup. Okay, it has a chapter on it. Chapter 3, Hillary's reset the Russian uranium deal. Okay, cool. A lot of what the Clintons did wrong was sort of like petty graft. Like, they did bad things that were kind of small and like not super political. Like, they would just sell a lecture for like a couple $100,000. They were like, and they sold like teas at the White House and shit. Like, they were just trying to like make profit for themselves. But sometimes they actually, you know, sold major political influence that was a big deal. instead of just doing like petty crimes. Sometimes they did like actual treason. If you're just going to read one book about them, I like Coulter's book the best, High Crimes and Misdemeanors. Although, a lot of people complain about, like, who cares about his sex life, but she does a pretty good job of addressing that in the book, and she also covers some other things. Anyway, I thought this was interesting. All of the USSR's foreign embassies were instructed to send agents to the United States to help defeat Reagan. This is about, like, there has been lots of meddling in elections, both other countries meddling in our elections and us meddling, Americans meddling in other countries' elections. Probably our government's done it, but I don't think there are any examples of that in this book. Anyways, so the USSR tried to meddle in 1980. The KGB issued talking points to their agents. You can still read them in New York Times op-eds from that period. Reagan was accelerating the arms race. He was crushing liberation movements abroad. He was part of the military-industrial complex. Oh, and he was a racist. So yeah, these are like Russian talking points from 1980 about Reagan. And I thought it was interesting to read like a short summary of those. Reagan won a landslide. The Soviet government, along with America's most influential newspaper, couldn't put a dent in the US election in the 80s, back when the Times was influential. But jumping into an exponentially larger media market in 2016, Russia turned the tide with a few Facebook ads. Okay, sure. And then she suggests that if people wanted actual evidence, they could like talk to some of the voters in the swing states and find how many people they can survey and get them to say, no, I didn't care about my job being outsourced or Mexican heroin destroying my community. Where'd you get that? The reason I voted for Trump was the Pizzagate conspiracy I saw on Facebook. So that's kind of ridiculous. So did WikiLeaks help Trump? Maybe. Could anyone have predicted that it would help Trump? Absolutely not. Even seasoned campaign veterans have no idea how to affect an election. Right? It's very hard to predict things. Like, the leaks talked about how the Democratic Party was conspiring against Bernie Sanders. Like, that is not obviously a pro-Trump thing. It seems like, one, it could help Sanders. Two, it could get Hillary replaced with Biden. Like, maybe they were trying to save the Democrats and help Obama, who preferred Biden. It's just very unpredictable what that kind of leak will do. So Coulter concludes, the Russians just hack us like all the time. They have that left over from the Cold War. Why kill those jobs? But it's the claim that releasing the DNC's emails would lead to a predictable and certain outcome where everything falls apart. Alright, suppose that's all true, so what? Mexico and Israel meddle in our elections all the time, so do the Chinese, apparently the British too. In the early 90s, the People's Republic of China funneled millions of dollars in illegal campaign donations to Bill Clinton and the Democrats. In addition to the illegality of the donations themselves, there was also evidence of a quid pro quo, which was aggressively covered up by the President and the Attorney General. No independent counsel, and boredom from our media watchdogs, even though that sounds a lot like serious fucking treason. In 2008, Slim saved the New York, Carlos Slim, Mexican billionaire, saved the New York Times from bankruptcy. Suddenly, the country's most influential newspaper had second thoughts about protecting our southern border. I don't know how much of a turnaround that was, but I think Anne has written about it before. Yeah, see Adios America. So if you doubt that, check out Adios America, chapter 13. Did I include Adios America in here somewhere yet? No? Alright, well we're definitely going to add that. Adios America is a very, very good, important book if you want to understand why Trump won the election and what's going on with the whole immigration thing. Trump read this book shortly before he gave his Mexican rapist speech, where he said the very unsayable thing that some Mexicans are rapists and they're not sending us their best people, and that we should actually try to get immigrants that would benefit our country instead of just any immigrants at all. Okay. So I had some doubts about this part. She's saying that Trump became pro moving the capital to Jerusalem after a donation from Sheldon Adelson. I have not investigated this. Trump's like, he seems too rich to just take a $25 million bribe to go against his values and principles. Like, why would he do that? Like, $25 million is a fuck ton of money for a lot of people, but for Trump, like, it doesn't seem like enough to bribe him. And he was already, like, somewhat pro-Israel in some ways before that, as far as I know, in my understanding. Like, I don't think he was good enough on it. Like, he didn't live up to my standards, but yeah, I don't think it necessarily would take a bribe for him to be somewhat pro-Israel. So this is some stuff about George Soros. Really, really nasty guy. If you're interested in him, read The Shadow Party, How George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and 60s Radicals Seized Control of the Democratic Party. And there's a follow-up pamphlet, The Shadow Party and the Shadow Government. And you can go to Discover the Networks and get more info. I think there's like an online version of this where you don't have to like buy a $3 pamphlet and get it in paper. Oh. Or there's just a Kindle version? Okay, here we go. Kindle version, $1. Much better. You don't need to buy a stupid paper version. More George Soros. See the book from part 1. Oops. Yeah, so if you care about what's happening to our politics and what's going wrong, learn about Soros and Alinsky. Alinsky is linked up here. And read the Shadow Party stuff. Very important. Anyway, Coulter knows a thing or two about Soros as well. She goes into some stuff about Soros and how he has fucked with various countries in large ways. And I'm going to read a bit. Soros, often working with the US State Department, has spent about $1 billion to install governments more to his liking in the former Soviet republics. He didn't care for the pro-Russian candidate who won the 2004 Ukrainian election. Soros used his network of non-profits, quote, to claim that the election was stolen. The State Department forced Ukraine to have a do-over. This colossal interference with another country's election was called the Orange Revolution. He did the same thing in Georgia in 2003, the Rose Revolution, and Kyrgyzstan in 2005, the Tulip Revolution. All three color revolutions followed the Soros formula. The winner of an election was immediately accused of fraud by Soros-funded locals based on Soros-funded exit polls and forced to step down as a result of Soros-funded youth protests. Then our government would muscle the country into holding another election. That sounds like really fucked up, eh? Let's see what the site says. CEG, Dr. Kamal Wickramasinge? I don't know. Lessons for Lanka, Malaysia's election story. Describing Soros's method of funding electoral observers and exit polls to lay the groundwork for phony electoral fraud claims. And there's some more sites related to this as well. So anyways. Oh, she cites Shadow Party. That's wonderful that she read David Horowitz's Shadow Party book. Anyways, yeah. Oh, here, Shadow Party as well. Cited with the full title. Plus some other books. Like 5 books or something. Anyway, so yeah, if you're interested in this stuff, there's a bunch of sites. So check them out. Although I noticed Soros busting heads with butting into other countries' affairs has neither turned out well nor been warmly appreciated by the targeted countries. The Ukrainian president deposed in 2004 was returned to office by the voters 2 years later. On the other hand, the Soros-approved leader in another place was met with violent protests and had to flee the country, and another one was forced to a Soros-installed leader was forced to flee. He was later stripped of his citizenship and is currently wanted by the government on various criminal charges. Thanks, pompous American billionaire. So yeah, Soros, very, very nasty guy. And that's the end of the video.